Alright guys, we made it to the Pull and Save here in Glendale, Arizona. We found our 2005 Honda Element. Like always, we're going to be in a huge hurry. They're almost closed. I got out here, realized I was going to need a Sawzall, which I tell you guys that you should have that in your tool arsenal, but of course I forgot it. Had to go back and get it, and I lost an hour, and now it's almost closing time, so we're going to be moving really quick. Looking at it here, we have the whole front core support is pushed in, and the lower subframe here is also pushed in, but it looks like we can still access that bolt there, and there's going to be one back over there that we can drop. Crossmember might drop down this way. We only want the transmission, and of course most of it is covered here by the accident. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to chop it out here and here. I would like to try to see what I can unbolt. Doesn't look like I'm going to have much access to this one to get this front area out, so what I might do is try to cut as much as possible to get all this stuff out of the way so we can access the transmission. We're going to take the intermediate shaft here. I kind of looked over the transmission as well, and it doesn't look like it's cracked or broken, so that is awesome, because we do want this for parts if we don't end up using it as an all-wheel drive transmission in the future. Again, I'm not going to take the shifter, although I think we'll go over how to remove the shifter on this car just so you guys understand how that works. I think this is going to be the first episode I've done with my Gorilla Grip gloves. Of course, I've used these plenty. At SEMA in 2018, I won a lifetime supply of their gloves. They have multiple styles that they sent me out, and then of course they sent me the nitro gloves. So I like wearing the nitro gloves underneath my mechanic gloves because their oil does leak through, and if you're trying to keep your skin clean like I am, so when I go into my truck, I can hold the steering wheel without getting it nasty. This is the kind of glove I prefer to use. It has the most dexterity. But what's really cool about their anti-slip technology is what I've noticed, that when I'm working on something really greasy and I go to grab my tools, I can still grip it. Now with the cheaper style gloves that maybe you've gotten from Harbor Freight, which I've done, you know, they're $2, where these have a little bit higher value. They are more than the Harbor Freight versions. They last much longer, and they clean very well. So now Alright, this section is becoming a little bit more challenging than I thought. So we're able to cut the T-bar mount stuff out and move it out of the way, but we have the radiator and the AC condenser is kind of jammed up in here, and we can't get these bolts off to get it out, and I really can't get the radiator out either. So what I'm trying to do is cut through this section here, but there's a lot of steel that's kind of folded over it off here, and so now what I'm trying to do is pry this section out. So I tried cutting this off, and now I'm prying this section out of here so that I can try to peel this out and expose the transmission. The radiator and the condenser out, you can see there's a lot more room to work here. You can see that our slave cylinder is indeed intact. We definitely want to keep that. We're going to unbolt this mount from the lower subframe here, and we can access that over here, but getting to the transmission is going to be pretty difficult. So I'm going to still remove this upper air box. I'll see what I can do about working to get this the battery box out, because it looks like the bolts are pretty crunched in there, and I don't know how well I'm going to be able to get at. I might try to still continue cutting this section out here as much as I can so that we can access it, because there's not a whole lot of room, and of course we don't have a whole lot of time. it's starting to look more and more like we're not going to be able to get this transmission out today. First off, we're losing a lot of time, and secondly, I'm going through batteries like crazy. The saw, it chews up the batteries like crazy. We are using the M18 larger cell batteries, but there's one that's even bigger than this that I might have to invest in next. But what makes me sad about these is they're not exactly cheap. Okay, now this is like probably, well, this is now going to be the second battery that I've gone completely through, and I don't know that it has anything to do with me or maybe just the construction of the battery itself, but it like disintegrates. It pulls itself apart, and once it starts separating here, it doesn't actually work anymore. This is the second battery this has happened to. You can see it's starting to separate right there, and of course when you go to check to see the charge, nothing happens, which also means it won't take a charge. So that means, you know, I got to pull this apart and see what I can repair. I didn't even try repairing the other one just because I'm so busy. A lot of busy professionals don't have time to take these things apart, you know, because that's the reason they buy things to begin with, so they don't have to deal with this stuff. So I think what we're going to do now is just kind of finish up what we can, take all the bolt-on stuff off, and when I have to come back tomorrow with a charged battery and new saw blades perhaps to get through the rest of this core support, because it is pretty tough. All right, on these jobs I end up doing take the intake manifold off. That means the injector cover comes off, and then we're going to pull off the intake manifold. That's going to expose the starter that's down here. And then so does this motor mount here. Now there's a hidden bolt underneath there that if you're not familiar with, you have to get. So these two bolts here kind of sandwich the transmission together here, and then there's one in the middle underneath. So I got this bolt out here, and then that's going to allow us to drop the subframe once we get the one in the back out, but I still have to get this off to separate the transmission. You're able to see the starter a little bit better. It's really tricky to see the bolt that is back behind the starter solenoid, and it looks like somebody's already tried to take this 17 out as well to maybe get the starter. Don't know, but there's a tool that I like to use, and that's this really long 3/8 ratchet, and it also has a swivel head. Most of my ratchets that I use are mostly B swivel heads. In my opinion, there's really no need for a fixed ratchet. The size of the bolt that holds the starter on is a number 14, but this right here is a medium 14. This has worked out really well for me. It gets back in here to reach the bolt, but what's important about what I'm trying to attempt here is the fact that there's a knock sensor right there, and a lot of the times when you're trying to pull that bolt out, you'll end up bottoming out on the knock sensor, and you won't be able to get your wrench out either. All right, guys, I think that we're gonna call it a day. It's just not gonna work out. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough battery. I gotta figure out what's wrong with the one that's broken, and I'm kind of don't want to do anything more. I really want this transmission, and I have suspicions the reason why it's been here as long as it has, it's been almost a week, is because this whole thing was pushed in there, and it was really hard to get to. On top of the fact that I can't even get to it with my tools, I don't want to go anymore because I don't want to encourage anybody to come and get this transmission because I want it. I don't know that I'm going to be able to come back within the next day to come get it, so I'm going to leave it with the tray there. If they try to get the shift linkage, that's fine. I do want the transmission, at least the intermediate shaft. All right, guys, it is the next day. We were up to about 1:30 last night trying to work on the car to get ready for import face-off yesterday, and it wasn't working out in our favor. We were unable to get the vehicle finished, so I came back out to the yard. A lot of my friends are over there at import face-off, and I'm very sad about it. I really want to be there, so I'm gonna jam on this car as fast as I can. We left off leaving it mostly covered up, and I still am not sure exactly how I'm going to get it out here. We got the battery box. It's completely crushed, and all the bolts are covered. I'm not sure how I'm going to get down in there. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start underneath while I start figuring out what it is that I'm going to do. There's an inspection plate here that we saw on our CRV. I'm going to take that off, and the rear motor mount brackets. one of the major issues with getting this lower subframe out is the fact that that bolt is covered by the tow hook. So I've already sawed to see if I could cut through it, and it looks like my saw will. That off so that I can get my impact socket directly on there. If I get that one off, I think I can get the rest off and drop the subframe. I'm not going to be taking the clutch with this one. I did see a lot of clutch material kind of hanging down there, so that tells me that the clutch was bad anyways. Alright, so I was able to get the transmission completely exposed. All the bolts are about to come off here. You can see it separate. I got the shifter cables off. Although we're not going to be taking these, I didn't want to cut them because somebody else might need them. Here's our battery box. I wasn't quite sure exactly what I was going to do about it because it's completely covered. The bolts are completely covered up, so I end up cutting like pieces of it out to see what will expose. And look, check that out. Ended up exposing our bolt here, and I'll be able to get to it. So I'm going to drop this one first, and then I'll drop the other two, and then this transmission should just fall down to the ground. Alright, so the transmission did drop, but you'll look here that it gets hung up on these studs, and it does that sometimes, and it looks like it was helped because the frame is pushing back on the speed sensor there, and that's something else I got to be careful about to make sure that that doesn't snap off as well. And normally what I would do to get this motor mount bolt off is I would remove the battery tray, and it'd be like a straight shot right to it, but because the battery tray is still there, I can't quite get it. So now I got to figure out how I'm going to drop this because it is bound on this piece here. I'm probably going to take a pry bar and try to get there because I can't get to that bolt at all, so I'm going to try to wiggle it out, but of course you got this here that's creating an issue. Well, you saw what I ended up having to do there. I ended up cutting right through the motor mount, which did drop the transmission as you saw there, but it was pretty violent. The engine did drop, and of course then the hood fell on me. So make sure that this stuff is well secured. You know, that's stuff that you learn from doing this from experience, but it looks like I'll be able to get this transmission out. Alright, so there it is. This transmission is absolutely gorgeous. It's in really, really good shape. It's very clean, so I know like looks a little dusty here in the camera, but once it gets... Good morning, guys. I'd like to thank you for being a fan of the show. I'd like to thank our current subscribers. I'd like to thank you for watching the video. If you made it this far, it ended kind of abruptly. This was a video I did a few months ago, and the camera had lost something. I can't quite remember whether it was a battery or SD cards. The footage I've been capturing lately is much better. I have a lot more equipment, and I'm learning a lot while we're doing this series. So this video was about the Element front-wheel drive K-series transmission. What we discovered is that is a transmission that can possibly turn into an all-wheel drive later in the future. So from what we've discovered, it looks like just the ring gear is required inside the transmission, and then the transfer case can go right onto it. Of course, that would require you to find a transfer case, but being that all-wheel drive is taking the industry by storm, finding replacement parts readily available is becoming more difficult. The two-wheel drive might be an option when looking for parts to replace that you might have broken, like a front casing or a back casing. We go into a little bit more depth on our sister channel at the VTEC Academy. I'm going to link that down in the description below. We break down all the all-wheel drive transmission that we had access to, and I do that along with Brian Gillespie. Make sure to check that out. Thank you again for watching. Happy tuning.